Since T-levels were first introduced in 2020 as new technical qualifications for 16 to 19-year-olds, they have rarely been out of the spotlight. In the last 2 years alone, we have had major reports on T-levels from the Education Select Committee in Parliament, Ofsted, and the National Audit Office, none of which painted a particularly rosy picture of how these qualifications have fared so far. The latest in this long line of inquiries came on the 27th of June, when the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, which monitors government spending, published its verdict on how T-levels have been designed and implemented. So what concerns did the Public Accounts Committee raise about T-levels? Why has this new brand of qualifications struggled to deliver the ambitions set out for them when they launched 5 years ago? And are things likely to get better or worse for T-levels over the rest of this Parliament? My guests are Rob Halfon, the MP for Harlow from 2010 to 2024, who was twice Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships at the Department for Education, and Sorah Gluck, a Senior Policy Advisor at the Edge Foundation. I'm Tom Richmond, and to find out whether T-levels are heading in the right or wrong direction, let's go inside your ed.
Welcome to Inside Your Ed, the podcast that looks inside the latest stories from across the education system in England, including primary and secondary schools, colleges, universities, and apprenticeships. You can listen to all our past episodes, subscribe to future episodes, and get in touch by visiting insideyoured.com.
Rob, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be too familiar with our technical education system, it would be great if you could give us a quick recap of, firstly, what a T-level actually is, and also what problems T-levels were supposed to solve when they were first proposed back in 2016 in the Sainsbury Review commissioned by the government.
Yeah, so T-levels are new vocational and technical qualifications that were designed to be a technical version of A-levels. They take 2 years. You do the core part in the first year, looking at the more academic side and understanding the subjects. And then the second year, you do 45 days of work experience. And it's much more of a practical year. I personally think that T-levels are an extraordinary qualification. I think it's potentially one of the great revolutions of the past 10 years in terms of skills. I recognise there are problems, which I'm sure we're going to discuss. But the reasons why T-levels were created, well, it started with a review led by a famous peer, Lord Sainsbury, someone who I very much admire. But in that review, he highlighted that there was something like 13,000 different vocational technical qualifications. Some of them were of poor quality. Some of them had very low uptake. And if you just take plumbing, for example, there were 28 different options of plumbing qualifications. And the other point was that the qualifications were very much awarding body stroke provider-led rather than employer-led. He also suggested in that review that all those qualifications weren't producing the technicians that we needed for the 21st century. So the difference with the T-levels, one, they're much harder, but the most important thing is they're employer-led. So they are designed by employers in conjunction with the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, now Skills England. And the whole purpose of that is to ensure that those who do those qualifications are more likely to get jobs. And just give you one very interesting stat, is that I think something like 30% of those who do complete their T-levels, who do the 45 days work experience, are actually employed by the companies that have given them that work experience. There are other great figures about outcomes of T-level students, those who complete, but I think that shows the difference in the system from the old system of BTECs and other similar qualifications.
Thank you, Rob. That's really helpful. So that's a little bit on what T-levels are. They're 2-year technical qualifications, which are very large qualifications designed to be a technical alternative to A-levels. Sorah, the first T-levels began in 2020. So what has happened since then in terms of how they've grown and developed?
Thank you for that, Tom. And I just want to preface everything I'm saying with the fact that I'm very supportive of the ambition behind T-levels, as Rob just outlined. We really needed a high quality, prestigious technical qualification post-16. And I want to just pay tribute to the incredible work that Rob has done, both in government and outside of government, in increasing the prestige of technical education. It's been really fantastic to see. So yeah, as you said, T-levels were introduced in 2020, and the government has slowly been building up how many subjects they're available in. So currently, if you look at the T-levels website, there are 20 subjects that they are available in. It will be 21 in September when marketing becomes available. So it's actually quite exciting to see how many subjects they cover, considering how in-depth they are and how soon it's been since they were introduced, just over the span of 5 years. By contrast, in Scotland, there's only 15 foundation apprenticeships available, and that's been going on for a lot longer. And it's exciting to see how many skills shortage industries they cover too. So there's lots in construction, early years, health, all of these industries that we really need high quality qualifications in to plug that kind of skills gap that we're seeing. It's not been totally smooth sailing in terms of the rollout of T-levels. We've seen some T-level subjects get scrapped before being delivered. So, for example, last year we saw the hairdressing and barbering T-level get scrapped because the industry fed back that actually they were quite satisfied with the qualifications already on offer in that industry and apprenticeships, and they think that's good enough for them in terms of qualifications. And other T-levels have been scrapped post-delivery. So, for example, the healthcare science T-level because of low demand. So there has been some setbacks, but overall it's been a positive forward push for T-levels, which is really great to see. In terms of uptake, the uptake hasn't been as good as the Department for Education wanted. Currently, 2.3% of 16 to 17-year-olds are doing T-levels, so it's really quite low when you compare it to the popularity of A-levels and BTECs. So that's definitely going to be a big push for the government moving forward to make sure that they're financially viable and available in the future.
Yes, so just for a bit of context for our listeners, that 2% of 16-year-olds is equivalent to around 26,000 students, I think, started at T-level on the latest numbers. But that compares to almost 300,000 students starting A-levels each year. So 26,000 is clearly a lot bigger than zero, but it's certainly not as big as A-levels, or at least not yet. Thank you, Sorah. That's where we've got to, which means we can now dig into some of the findings from the Public Accounts Committee report on T-levels, because they have flagged quite a few concerns about where they think we've ended up. I think one of the most striking findings for me was around visibility, because despite being announced almost a decade ago and having been delivered in some colleges and schools for 5 years, only half of GCSE pupils and only a third of employers have even heard of T-levels, let alone shown any interest in them. Sorah, how worried are you about these findings? Do you think this level of visibility is encouraging or discouraging?
It's actually quite interesting that the polling that the Public Accounts Committee references there tracks quite well with the findings of Edge's own polling that we did last year on public attitudes towards 16 to 18 education, where we found that half of the public were aware of T-levels. I do want to take this word aware with a pinch of salt, because we also asked them, are you aware of B-levels, a made-up qualification? And 32% said that they were. So it's something we need to take with a grain of salt there. I wouldn't be too worried about the overall public's perception there, because they are very new qualifications. Same with the employers. There's always going to be a lag between a qualification being rolled out and employers being aware of them. So beyond the industry placement aspect of it and the employer-led aspect of it, employers don't really know about qualifications until they start seeing them on CVs. So there's going to be a while until they're actually aware of these qualifications as the T-level students start entering the workforce. I am quite worried about the fact that half of GCSE students don't know about them, because considering how much the Department for Education has been pumping money into these qualifications and the outreach that they've been developing. So it is quite worrying how few are aware of it. But we don't want awareness to be the end point with T-levels. So Edge did some research on the experience of T-level students a couple of years ago, and we found that while a lot of students were obviously aware of T-levels because they're on the course, they felt that they didn't truly understand the reality of what the program was until they were on it. So they felt that they were missold perhaps what the qualification actually was when they were on it. So in terms of the quality of teaching, the industry placement aspect of it, how many universities will accept T-levels as entry requirements, they kind of felt that they weren't getting the full picture in terms of careers advice. So that's really important. And we need to make sure that everyone who wants to do a T-level fully understands what it entails. And this isn't just an issue with T-levels, we see it across lots of other technical and vocational options. So we found similar findings with degree apprenticeships, for example, where a lot of degree apprentices felt that they didn't really understand what was actually expected of them until they got onto the course. So there's a lot we could do in terms of careers advice more generally with technical education, because invariably a lot of teachers will have gone through the traditional academic GCSE A-level university route, so they don't really fully understand the full scope of technical qualifications and what they actually entail. But I think we also have to accept that even with the best marketing budget and the best careers advice, there's going to be a ceiling on how many young people are actually interested in doing a T-level. They are very, very specific courses, and not many 16-year-olds are actually fully set on a career pathway at that age. So we also need to kind of lower our expectations for how many young people will be interested in these qualifications too.
Rob, I think I'm correct in saying that you were the Minister for Skills back in 2016 when T-levels first started to appear in policy conversations. So given that experience and what you've seen over the past 9 years, what do you make of this apparently patchy visibility that T-levels seem to have attracted?
Yeah, so first of all, there's a lot to unpack there, particularly in the last answer. And I have to sort of, in a very gentle way, take huge issue with Sorah's last comment, which was to lower expectations. I think that has been the whole problem over the past few years about the arguments about alternative qualifications, BTECs versus T-levels. And I want to level up rather than level down. And the people who are supporting alternative qualifications, BTECs, not all of them, but a lot of them say, well, disadvantaged students do them, so we should keep them. Well, I think that's the worst reason, because otherwise you have a kind of ghetto of different qualifications. Disadvantaged students do some, and then the middle classes and everyone else do prestigious qualifications. The big problem that we've had with T-levels is we've got, in essence, an old world that refuses to die, which is the alternative qualifications and BTECs, and a new world that is not yet born. There has been debates and arguments about alternative qualifications versus T-levels, and there's been delays. And are the BTECs staying? Are they going? Oh, yes, we're going to keep them for another year. We're going to delay them. No, we're not. Yes, we are. Jackie Smith, to her credit, has been very, very committed to T-levels. But that has been the problem, take-up, because the colleges are still working on an old system. And as I say, it's the old world not yet dead and the new world not yet fully born. And T-levels have only been around for a few years. What I would rather do is prepare those students who may not be fully prepared for T-levels because they are hard. What I would do is further invest in the T-level foundation year, which I instituted when I was a minister to prepare students for T-levels. Now, what was happening, and I'm only remembering the statistics from when I was in post, was that 50% of students who were doing the foundation year went on to do level 3. Some went to do T-levels, not enough, but others went on to do level 3s. Now, what we need to do is invest in that foundation year and give money to colleges and providers to prepare students better for T-levels. I absolutely agree with Sorah on the careers advice. That has got to change. My first ever speech in Parliament way back in 2010 was about encouraging more schools to teach skills and apprenticeships as options rather than just the traditional A-level stroke university. Given that this is a very new qualification, it's only been there for a few years, given what I've just said about this constant confusion about how many alternative qualification stroke BTECs we're going to keep, student starts grew by 58% between 2022 and September 2023 in terms of the T-level. You've got something like 367 providers offering T-levels. And if you look at those who complete, and I accept there is an issue about completion, but we can come on to that as well, 93% of T-level completers were in education employment 9 to 10 months after finishing their course. I think there has been a significant change. And I go back to that figure that I gave you at the beginning. To me, the most important part of the T-level is the work experience side of it, and the fact that 30% of those who get work experience with companies, businesses, then get employment with those companies. I think that is an extraordinary statistic. And what I would like us to do is just keep the BTECs and the alternative qualifications that don't overlap with T-levels, or special ones that are particularly good, have brilliant outcomes, but make it very clear that T-levels are here, they're here to stay, the government's going to invest in them. And as I say, we invest in the T-level foundation year. I would fund that significantly to prepare those students so that we don't have a ghetto of qualifications whereby poor students or disadvantaged students are doing BTECs whilst the middle classes are doing doing T-levels. The final thing I'd say is I met an incredible head teacher from UTC Leeds, a lady called Hannah Wilson, who is absolutely supportive of T-levels. And she was saying that kind of the old world where you would get in deprived areas, people doing some BTECs that were of poor quality, poor outcomes, and they would just be the ones that would be pumped out by the providers, and that she thought that the T-levels were really good and really important. And when I said, are they too hard? She said, it's good that they're too hard. And I really will end here. My favourite quote of all time is a quote from President Kennedy, and I had a picture of President Kennedy on my wall in the DFE. And he said, when he sent man to the moon, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And T-levels are not easy, they are hard. But we know those who complete have great outcomes. And I've been to colleges all over the country where aspirational, hardworking students are successfully doing T-levels and going on to great things. And I am absolutely convinced that as long as the government continues to commit to T-levels, that we invest in the foundation year, that we make it clear that T-levels are here to stay, that more and more students will do them. We level up rather than level down.
Well, you mentioned the completion rates. This was another area that the Public Accounts Committee took a look at, and they had some quite interesting findings in this space. So just to give some examples of what they found around completion and satisfaction rates as well from students. There was quite a lot of variation between different subjects. So 79% of students on the education and early years T-level were satisfied with their course, but that compared to just 39% on the health and science T-level. And in terms of dropout rates, 73% of 16-year-olds are finishing their T-levels, and that compares to 92% of A-level students. So, Rob, we've got a lot of variation between subjects. The Public Accounts Committee are clearly worried about some of the overall trends here.
So, first of all, overall satisfaction was 57% of those doing the T-levels. And secondly, on the completion rate, that has improved. It's still a problem, but it is improving year by year, albeit incrementally. And again, comparable to some of the other vocational qualifications. Now, there are reforms on the individual T-levels as well. I mean, I do think the amount of exam time and so on, that can all be changed and made a bit lighter, not easier. And I personally have much more focus on the practical and the work experience, and I tried to do that when I was a minister. So I think those changes will help. But as I say, what I think for those students who do find the T-levels difficult, I think the way to do it is not get rid of them. I think that would be the worst thing to do. I think what we do is we invest in T-level foundation years and prepare students who might find T-levels difficult to prepare them on the path to T-levels. Now, the government, if you look at what they're doing on apprenticeships, so they say, well, apprenticeship completion rates are not good enough, although that's improved as well. So they're going to introduce foundation apprenticeships. The argument behind that is that you prepare those people for apprenticeships, so when they actually do them, it's a lot easier for them. And I think the same principle applies for T-levels. So it's a new qualification. It's not easy to introduce a new qualification. The T-levels are hard, but if you invest in that, the quality of teaching is going up. More and more colleges are taking up T-levels. I think as more people take it up, as teaching develops in terms of the T-levels, if we invest in the foundation years, as I've described, I think we will carry on improving those completion rates. And they are improving, albeit incrementally, year after year.
Sorah, what's your verdict on these satisfaction rates and dropout rates? Would you describe them as just teething problems, or do you think there's something else going on here?
So firstly, just to clarify about what I said before about lowering expectations for how many young people would be interested in T-levels, that wasn't about the rigour of T-levels. I think absolutely we should maintain their rigour. It was more about the size of them. When we did public polling, we found that the majority of the public wanted a mix and match option post-16, so the ability to take academic qualifications alongside technical qualifications. It's really important that we keep the options broad and we allow them to explore different subjects and different qualifications in that time of life when they're figuring out exactly what they want to do later. Something I think we might want to consider is, modularizing T-levels, making them smaller, something that the EPI, the Education Policy Institute, recommended in their report last year. On the satisfaction rate, I do agree with Rob that a lot of these are probably just teething issues. When we did our research with T-level students last year, we found that a lot of the issues around teaching resources and the lack of past exam papers were due to the novelty of the new qualification. And the students themselves, very interestingly, recognised it themselves. So some of the students we spoke to on the design and surveying T-level said that they actually found that the quality of their course improved over the course of the programme. So it's definitely something that I'm quite optimistic about improving. I think moving forward, we do need to think about the structure of the T-level, because when we talk about these dropout rates, and they are very concerning, what's more concerning is that these young people are leaving this qualification with nothing to show for it. And EPI found in their report on T-levels that almost half of these dropouts were missing from education a year on. So we don't have very good results and progression data for those young people who are dropping out. So I think as a first point, we really need to make sure that they have something to show for it. That could be through modularizing T-levels or assessing them a bit earlier on, so that we can ensure that there's some kind of portability of the qualification, that they can move on and put it towards something else after they drop out.
Yes, the Public Accounts Committee did make quite a few interesting observations around how T-levels have been constructed and how they work. And they received some evidence that was suggesting there are some aspects of the T-level qualification itself that might need to be looked at again. So, Sorah, going back to your point from earlier, some students were unclear about what T-levels offered, while other students flagged the high workload from these very large T-level qualifications. And Rob, you've already mentioned the assessment burdens that students might face as well because these qualifications are large. Rob, where do you think we should go from here in terms of these sorts of concerns? Is there a case to potentially reduce the amount of content and assessment in T-levels, as Sorah was suggesting, just to make them a bit more manageable, or does that dilute the qualification if you do that?
I'm very keen that, as I say, going back to President Kennedy, we do these things not because they're easy, because they're hard. So you maintain the rigour, because if you want this to be a prestigious, world-class qualification, which I think they are and will be, I think it's very important. Having said that, there was some of the assessment, I was told one of them was around 67 hours, but I can't remember which particular course it was. But if that is true, it seems ridiculous. So definitely reduce the time of assessment. And I would be quite happy if it was more practical. And, some students say the core part they find hard. If there was more practical part of the T-level as well. But some of these reforms are coming in anyway. And the other thing is, if somebody completes the first year of a T-level, I wouldn't be unhappy if there was some kind of certificate that they were given. Not to say they completed the T-level, but at least that they had done partial T-level. The only thing that I would worry about, just to counter my own argument, is that would lead to more dropouts, because people would think that would be enough. So you have to do that very, very carefully. But I'm open to the debate about whether or not, if somebody completes the core part, they could get some kind of certificate to show that they complete the core part. Of course, the employer would know they haven't done the second year. So you have to be very clear. But as long as it doesn't lead to more dropouts, I think it's definitely something to consider.
Sorah, based on your research at the Ed Foundation, is there anything else that you think students want to see from T-levels? Are these students experiencing some barriers that you think are solvable beyond just making the content and assessment a bit lighter or changing the way that we do it?
I think one step we can go towards is encouraging more Russell Group universities to accept them. Quite a big proportion of T-level students go on to university afterwards. So that's clearly a key reason why a lot of them go onto that course, because they kind of see that movement onto HE afterwards. But some students said that they were quite shocked by the fact that not many universities accepted them. So I think that would go a good way towards increasing the prestige of T-levels and getting students to understand, you're on just as good of a footing compared to people doing A-levels if you're doing a T-level, if you do want to go on to that next step. Although that should never be the goal. I think the goal of T-levels were to prepare young people for work. So we should keep moving ahead with that. But as I said earlier, something I'm really quite keen on us exploring is reducing a T-level down into 3 components, so that young people can decide to take the full 3 for a full T-level, or do one small T-level with 2 A-levels or a BTEC or something along those lines. We need to keep the options open for people at this age. I think that will make it a lot more appealing to them.
Rob, this point around entry to higher education with T-levels has been quite an interesting development, which if my memory serves me correctly, I don't think was in the original Sainsbury review. It very much talked about T-levels as a technical qualification leading to employment. But as Sorah says, we've got a lot of young people who might be starting a T-level, who might then want to go on to university afterwards. Is that a problem from your perspective, if actually T-levels become another route to university? When you were a minister, did you want T-levels to be something different?
I want students to be able to have the choice of what kind of progression. I want them to have that progression. That's the crucial thing. Either they get a job or an apprenticeship, or they go to university. And I think it's good that 130 universities are now offering T-level students places. I wouldn't, this is going to be subject for a separate podcast perhaps, but I am very wary of this obsession with the Russell Group. The Russell Group was a group of universities who met in a hotel in Bloomsbury Square called the Russell Hotel or something, and that's why they're called the Russell Group. St Andrews University, which is a great university, is not even a member of the Russell Group. And I think we are obsessed as a country about the Russell Group. And I think that is wrong. And I think we should be celebrating and welcoming brilliant universities like Nottingham Trent University, for example, that has outstanding vocational apprenticeship provision. I think we should be encouraging students to go to those universities that believe in vocational education and technical education and have great outcomes, and not say, well, we want more Russell Group universities to have them just because they're a group of universities who, as I say, met in a hotel and they do a lot of research. They may be very good, by the way, but there are plenty of non-Russell Group universities who have even better outcomes than Russell Group universities. Now, this is a debate for another day, but I was always thought it was wrong that schools were judged by how many students went to Russell Group universities rather than how many students went and did great apprenticeships or went to great vocational and technical universities. So I'm just happy that they go to any university, not a self-selecting group of universities who happen to call themselves the Russell Group.
Okay, we are almost at the end of this episode, so it's time for one last question. The Department for Education's estimates of how T-levels were going to grow have proved rather erratic, it seems to me. Originally, the department was aiming for 100,000 T-level students by 2025, but in 2022, they revised this down to 70,000 students by 2027. Now the department is forecasting 66,000 students by 2029. So the estimates have been too ambitious so far, and yet the department still thinks it can jump from 26,000 students now to 66,000 students in 2029. So my question is, do you think the department will hit this reduced goal of 66,000 T-level students in 4 years from now? Sorah, are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about the government's chances of hitting that target?
I'm not overly optimistic with T-levels in their current form that will reach those targets. There are two key areas that I think the government could probably improve on if they are to get that target. So first of all, make T-levels more appealing to students by making them smaller and stackable, sort of akin to foundation apprenticeships in Scotland, where it's very similar to a T-level, but a lot smaller. And you can take them alongside hires and other qualifications in that stage. So I think that will definitely de-risk the qualification for students. Second of all, we need to make them more appealing to employers. So a big part of why it's hard to reach these numbers is because schools and colleges have to get the industry placement in the bag before offering these T-levels, and they are very, very hard to find. And we are asking a lot of employers, and we're only going to increase that ask of employers in the coming years as foundation apprenticeships get introduced, as the youth guarantee gets rolled out, as the 10 days work experience gets introduced. So we have all these different asks of employers, but in not a very coherent system. So what I would like to see is more brokerage services locally, specifically for SMEs who make up 99% of the business population in the UK, to help them, first of all, understand their skills needs, which is very hard for SMEs to do, current skills needs and skills needs in the future. And second of all, help them understand how the local training offer could help meet those needs. So that could be an apprenticeship, that could be a T-level, that could be offering work experience or skills boot camps. There are so many different options, but it's so difficult for businesses to understand those options. So we are actually doing some work at Edge. Sorry, I just want to do a shameless plug here. We've got a report out in the autumn that's going to look at local brokerage services, specifically through the lens of apprenticeships, but we think it's really important that we kind of weave in all these other technical options too, so that we can make sure that employers keep being involved in the system.
Thank you, Sorah. Rob, are we going to get from 26,000 to 66,000 T-level students over the next 4 years?
Just a number of points here. First, I think it was a big mistake of my previous government in the past, is that when it comes to T-levels and apprenticeships, people are focusing on starts. Like we said, we're going to have 3 million apprentices. And looking back on it, although it's a wonderful thing to say, or we're going to have 100,000 T-level students, I think it was a mistake that we should focus on, looking back on it, quality over quantity. And I think if you improve the quality and you work on the T-levels and you work with the employers, you're much more likely to get more people to take them up. And you work on the completion rates and the achievement. I'm much more concerned about the completion rates and achievement by the numbers who are doing them. because if you take care of all that, the quantity will take care of itself. But having said all that, as I mentioned, you've had a 58% increase between September 22 and September 2023, 16,000 new learners. The numbers are growing. If they grow incrementally, I'm happy, as long as we focus on achievements, on completions. And I'd just say one other thing, just on the employer thing. What I find mystifying is I go to some colleges, and some of them are in, deprived parts of the country, and they have no problem getting employer engagement for the T-levels students. And then you go to others and they say they do have a problem. And so I don't get it, really. I think that where you have brilliant colleges, brilliant leadership, where you have a team of people engaging with employers, I think that employers take it up. And the other thing is, the government have actually made it easier in terms of the work experience side, because you can do more of it off premises. So I just don't accept this. I think where there's a will, we will get more employer engagement. I think once the T-levels program is committed to its success, and employers really see that this is the vocational qualification of the 21st century, which I absolutely believe, incredibly exciting, that will transform the prestige of vocational and technical education for 16 to 19 in our country. Once we get that through, I think I'll have more and more employers taking it up, and I think even those colleges are having problems will find more employer engagement.
Thank you, Rob. And that brings us to the end of this episode. My thanks to Rob and Sorah for helping us unpack the Public Accounts Committee's report on T-levels. Inside Your Ed is now heading off for its regular summer break, so please do use the next few weeks to catch up on any episodes that you missed by visiting insideyoured.com. And if you're new to this podcast, then don't forget to hit subscribe to make sure you join me at the start of the new academic year when I next go inside your ed. Bye-bye for now.